She walked into the courthouse like any other woman. Calm, graceful, black. But in the eyes of the officer watching her from behind the security scanner, that last word meant something dangerous. Before she could even say her name, he pulled her aside. Called it a random screening. What happened next wasn't protocol. It was punishment. And as her silver curls hit the cold tile floor, everyone thought she'd walk away broken. But they didn't know the woman they had just humiliated was about to take her seat at the bench and change everything. Grab a sit and watch what's coming. Before we continue the story, like this video and comment where you're watching us from, so we can appreciate you. Let's continue the story. It was 7:45 a.m. when Naomi Ellis pulled her car into the judge's parking lot behind the old courthouse in Montgomery. The sky was soft with overcast light, the air thick with southern heat. She reached into the glove box, retrieved her leather folder, and glanced at herself in the mirror. Her silver curls were pinned back neatly, her pearl earrings catching a glint of light. She didn't wear her robe to court. Not yet. Naomi believed in walking into every room as a citizen first. As she climbed the steps toward the main entrance, a security officer at the door gave her a look. Not one of respect. Not recognition. It was the look black women in power know all too well, the one that sizes you up, tries to reduce you. "Ma'am," he said, holding up a hand as she neared. "Step out of line." Naomi blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," the man said. His badge read Officer Brent Collins. His face was lined with arrogance, his voice as sharp as his crew cut. "This is a federal building. We do random screenings here." Naomi kept her voice calm. "I have my credentials. You can show them after the search," he said, already gesturing to the hallway to the right. Now, other people in the lobby began to turn. Naomi felt her chest tighten. She glanced at a younger female officer at the scanner. She looked away. She followed Collins without speaking. This wasn't the place to raise her voice. Not yet. The room they entered was narrow, clinical, with a metal table and a steel chair in the center. A camera blinked silently in one corner. "Remove your jacket," Collins said. "I'm not a suspect," Naomi replied calmly. "Then you've got nothing to hide." She handed him her ID and federal badge. He glanced at it, then shoved it into his back pocket like it meant nothing. "You don't recognize this?" she asked. "I see a lot of badges," he said flatly. "Yours doesn't impress me." Naomi's pulse spiked, but her voice never changed. "Return it. Now." Instead, Collins reached for a pair of clippers that sat nearby. Her voice sharpened. "What do you think you're doing? Could be something in the hair. We've had people hide blades, contraband, especially with all that volume." He smiled. She didn't. "This isn't security," she said, steady. "This is abuse." He didn't stop. The clippers buzzed to life. The sound was deafening in the small space. Before she could react, he pressed the blade to her scalp. Her silver curls, carefully grown over decades, fell to the floor in chunks. Naomi didn't flinch. Not a tear. Not a scream. But her fists were clenched so tight her nails pierced her skin. When it was done, Collins dusted his hands. "Now you look more like someone who belongs here." Naomi took back her badge without a word. Her head burned with humiliation, but her spine stayed straight. She walked down the courthouse corridor like she had walked it 1,000 times before. But this time silence followed her. The clerks who looked at her said nothing. Some knew. Most didn't care. The courtroom 3B, she stopped. The bailiff, someone knew, opened the doors. And the room froze. Reporters, lawyers, plaintiffs, all stared. The woman they had just seen escorted like a criminal was now walking to the judge's bench. She reached the podium, picked up her robe and slipped it on slowly. Officer Collins was still posted at the back. When their eyes met, his face drained of color. Naomi adjusted her robe, stepped behind the bench, and turned to the clerk. "Is the docket ready?" The clerk's voice trembled. "Why, yes, Your Honor." Naomi nodded. "Then let's begin." Naomi Ellis sat tall behind the bench. The courtroom hushed. She was no longer just a judge presiding over a civil misconduct hearing. She was a symbol of something much larger, a disruption in the system that could no longer be ignored. The gallery was still buzzing from the realization. The woman they had seen humiliated less than an hour ago was not a victim. They were staring at the judge. And the shame was no longer hers to carry. Case 3179B. The clerk called out. State of Alabama versus Officer Devin Marks. The irony was thick. Another case of police misconduct. Another black protester left with broken bones and no justice. Until now. The defense lawyer shifted in his seat. He'd been confident walking in. Now he looked like he was trying to disappear into his tie. Bring in the first witness, Naomi ordered. A door creaked open. A man walked in, mid-40s, tall, calloused hands, gray sweat gathering at his collar. His name was Curtis Bell. He was a warehouse worker and a father of 3. 2 years ago, his teenage son was tackled during a peaceful protest. He had asthma. The officers didn't care. The boy almost died. Curtis took the stand, cleared his throat, and began. I watched my boy go down like he was nothing, he said, his voice cracking. He was on the ground, coughing, grabbing his chest. I begged them to let him up. They said, he'll live. Naomi didn't blink. She let him finish every word. She let the silence after each sentence stretch. No interruptions. No objections. Only truth. And what happened after? The prosecutor asked. They said he resisted. Charged him with obstruction. Dropped it quietly when the footage leaked. And Officer Marks? Still patrolling. Naomi finally spoke. Thank you, Mr. Bell. You may step down. Curtis hesitated, then added, I just want to know that someone sees us now. She nodded. You've been seen. At the back of the room, Officer Brent Collins sat like a stone. He hadn't moved since the start of the hearing. His arms were crossed. His badge hung heavy on his chest. But no one was saluting it now. Naomi watched him. Not directly. Just enough to remind him she hadn't forgotten. After the second witness, she called a brief recess. The courtroom began to empty slowly. She didn't move. Just sat, fingers laced on the bench. Officer Collins, she finally said. He flinched. Yes, Your Honor. Step forward. The entire room turned to look. Reporters stopped packing their bags. Even the security guards went still. He stood, stiff as a board, and walked to the center of the courtroom. She waited until he stood directly under her gaze. State your name for the record. He swallowed. Brent Collins. How long have you served at this courthouse? 11 years. And how many people have you pulled into that room for random screenings? His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Naomi leaned slightly forward. How many of them were black? Your Honor, How many women? How many complaints have you shredded, ignored, or laughed off in the break room? He stared at his feet. I said. Naomi's voice was low but sharp. Answer. I don't know. You didn't care enough to count, she said. But let me help you. 12 formal complaints. 4 internal reports. All buried. The courtroom was dead silent. You took my badge, my ID, my hair, thinking I was powerless. You saw black and assumed weakness. His hands were trembling. Naomi stood. You didn't just humiliate a woman. You assaulted a federal judge in her own courthouse. She turned to the 2 marshals near the back. Escort Officer Collins into holding, separate from general population. Civil rights violations pending. No, wait, he shouted. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know who you were. That's the problem, Naomi said coldly. You never even asked. The officers moved in. The cuffs clicked. Collins was escorted out, no longer a symbol of control, but a man crushed by his own arrogance. Naomi sat down slowly, her robe draped around her like armor. Later that afternoon, back in chambers, Naomi stood at the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass. A knock broke her focus. It was her clerk, Angela. Behind her stood a woman Naomi didn't recognize. Early 20s, glasses, clipboard hugged to her chest. This is Mia. She interned here last summer. Angela said quietly. She asked to speak with you. Naomi nodded. Come in. Mia stepped forward, eyes wide, hands trembling. Your Honor, she began. I saw what happened this morning. I was here. I was in the hall when Officer Collins took you away. Naomi stayed silent. I should have done something, but I was scared. I thought, what if I lost my chance to be here? Naomi walked over, placed a hand gently on Mia's shoulder. You're here now, and that matters. I want to testify, Mia said. If you need me, I'll speak. Naomi gave a small nod. Thank you. Your voice will count. The courtroom buzzed with tension. By now, word had spread about the arrest, the Clippers, and the woman behind the bench. Naomi Ellis took her seat with quiet authority. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a reckoning. A new witness was called to the stand. Denise Granger, the prosecutor announced. Naomi's breath caught for a moment. Denise, mid-50s, professional blazer, natural hair cropped close, had once worked in courthouse records. Quiet, unshakable, respected, and buried in silence. She took the stand, swore her oath, adjusted her glasses. Miss Granger, the prosecutor asked, how long were you employed at this courthouse? 21 years. And during that time, did you ever encounter complaints about Officer Brent Collins? Denise didn't flinch. Too many to count. Can you estimate? 12 formal ones that I logged personally. At least 20 more that were brushed off or redirected. And what happened to those complaints? Denise paused, looked directly at Naomi. They disappeared. Some were reclassified. Some marked, resolved, without follow-up. A few just vanished. The courtroom stirred. Who gave the order? The prosecutor pressed. Denise's voice faltered but didn't break. Judge Michael T. Rourke. Gasps rippled through the room. Rourke, a longtime federal judge. Naomi's predecessor. A man who once told her she was too emotional for the bench. And what reason did he give? The prosecutor asked. He said, we can't go poking holes in our own wall. It'll bring the whole damn place down. Naomi felt that line like a punch to the ribs. There it was, the truth finally spoken. The courthouse didn't ignore corruption by accident, preserved it on purpose. When the recess was called, reporters flooded the steps outside. Cameras, questions. Civil rights attorneys flew in from out of state. Protesters stood with signs reading, Protect Black Women. 12 complaints. 0 accountability. We stand with Judge Ellis. Back in chambers, Naomi stared at the memo she'd just been handed. It was from the DOJ. They were launching a formal investigation into the courthouse staff, past and present. Collins wasn't the only target now. The entire system was under review. Angela, her clerk, entered again. Your Honor, Reverend Samuels is here. Naomi looked up, surprised. James Samuels? She hadn't seen him in years. He had once marched alongside her mother during the Montgomery protests. A relic of a different kind of resistance. He stepped in, gray suit, tired eyes, steady voice. You're making history, Naomi. I didn't come here to be a symbol. That's what makes you one. He handed her a worn envelope. Inside are names. People who were mistreated, harassed, threatened, and never heard. Many never filed complaints. They were told not to. Some couldn't afford to lose their jobs. Naomi opened it. 2 pages. 43 names. 43 stories. She looked up, jaw set. They'll be heard. That afternoon, the courtroom was standing room only. Every bench filled. The air was alive. Not with noise, but expectation. Naomi tapped the gavel. This court is in session. She stood, holding a thick folder in hand. Before we proceed, I'm entering into record newly uncovered evidence. This includes complaint records, internal memos, and communications regarding Officer Collins and the deliberate suppression of misconduct reports. The defense attorney stood. Your Honor, we'd like to request. She held up a hand. Sit down. He froze. She turned to the gallery. Let the record show that this court no longer protects silence. Every name in this folder represents a choice, a decision to ignore justice in the name of order. That ends now. From the back of the courtroom, a voice called out, "Your Honor." Heads turned. A man, late 60s, worn cap in his hands, stood near the exit. "Name?" Naomi asked. "Thomas Green. I was thrown down those courthouse steps by Collins in 2009 for raising my voice. My ribs broke in 3 places. They said I slipped. Was a complaint filed?" He nodded. "It disappeared." Naomi took a breath. "Step forward, Mr. Green." One by one, hands rose. A dozen, then 2 dozen. People who had never been heard now lined up in silence, waiting to speak. The next morning, Naomi walked into the courtroom without her robe, just herself. She laid the robe across the bench and addressed the gallery. "I've served behind this bench for 6 years, and I've watched too much go unpunished because of titles, uniforms, and fear." She held up a new file. "This is the Ellis Mandate. Effective immediately, it requires anti-bias training, annual psychological evaluations, and a zero-tolerance policy for racial profiling within this courthouse." She turned to the bailiffs. "You will be retrained, or you will be replaced." No one spoke. Then, softly from the benches, a young woman stood and clapped once. Then another. Then more. But Naomi raised her hand. "This isn't applause," she said. "This is accountability." She turned to the prosecutor. "Proceed." The courtroom was silent as Brent Collins was escorted in. He no longer wore a badge, only handcuffs and a blank prison-issued jumpsuit. The same man who once dragged others into humiliation now walked slowly, each step echoing louder than the last. Naomi Ellis sat behind the bench, no longer just a judge. She was a reflection of justice reclaimed. Collins didn't look up. He stood beside his court-appointed lawyer, pale, twitching, broken in spirit. Naomi addressed him without flinching. "Mr. Collins, you were sworn to protect the law, but instead, you desecrated it with prejudice, violence, and arrogance. You didn't fail to recognize authority, you chose to ignore humanity." He shifted, but she continued. "For abuse of power, violation of civil rights, and unlawful assault of a federal officer, this court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, the maximum permitted under the statute." His lawyer opened his mouth as if to object. Naomi raised her hand. "But the legal sentence is only part of your judgment." She leaned forward. "You spent your career determining who was worthy of dignity. Today, the same system you thought protected you strips away your power, just as you stripped it from others." She looked into his eyes for the first time. "No badge will save you now. Only reflection. Only remorse." She turned to the officers. "Take him away." As Collins was led out, the gallery didn't cheer. They didn't move, because it wasn't about celebration. It was about witnessing. Back in her chambers, Naomi sat alone. Her robe lay folded on her desk. In front of her was the same compact mirror from the morning of the incident. Her reflection stared back. Scalp nearly bare, small coils just beginning to grow again. The woman looking back wasn't broken. She was stripped of illusion but not power. A knock. Her sister, Darlene, entered quietly with a small stool and electric clippers. "You ready?" she asked softly. Naomi nodded. "No press. No audience. Just family." As Darlene moved the clippers carefully over Naomi's head, each pass was slow, deliberate, this time by choice, not violence. When it was done, she handed Naomi a mirror. Naomi stared at her reflection. Clean-shaved, glowing, full of purpose. "This is who I am now," she whispered. "No," Darlene said with a proud grin. "This is who you've always been. Now the world sees it." In the weeks that followed, the courthouse changed. The Ellis Mandate was adopted by 5 other federal districts. DOJ investigations led to resignations, retrials, and sweeping policy changes. More importantly, people started speaking up. Young interns reported misconduct. Officers who'd once turned a blind eye now refused to stay silent. And citizens who had been voiceless for years finally found their voices. Naomi received countless letters. Not just from legal professionals but from mothers, students, janitors, and young black girls who now saw the law differently. She didn't read them for ego. She read them for fuel. 3 months later, she stood on a podium in Washington, D.C. The room was full of dignitaries, lawmakers, civil rights icons. The president stood beside her. Naomi was being awarded the Presidential Medal of Justice. When she approached the microphone, the room fell still. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said, her voice calm. "I didn't fight for recognition. I fought because I had no choice. Because silence is not neutrality. Because too many people like me were told to stay in line, keep our heads down, and endure." She paused. "But we're done enduring." Her voice firmed. "This medal belongs to every person who was silenced. To every woman who was told her anger was too loud. To every man who was told his pain was too invisible. This is for the voiceless." Applause rose, deep and honest. Naomi didn't smile for the crowd. She smiled for herself. 1 week later, Naomi visited a local high school. A teacher had invited her to speak about law and leadership. She expected 30 kids. Instead, she found a full auditorium. One girl in the front row had a shaved head, just like Naomi's. Another held a notebook filled with quotes. A boy wore a homemade t-shirt that read, *, Judge Ellis changed the game. *. The students asked real questions. How do you stay strong when people doubt you? What does justice really mean? And the last one, from a quiet boy in the back. Do you still believe the system works? Naomi took a breath. I don't believe in what the system was, she answered. But I believe in what it can become. And I believe in people like you asking that question. That's how change starts. When she walked off the stage, she didn't feel like a judge. She felt like a bridge. She came into that courtroom like anyone else, with her head held high. They tried to shame her, strip her, silence her, but they didn't break her. They woke her. And when the gavel fell, it wasn't just a case that ended. It was an era. Because Judge Naomi Ellis didn't just deliver justice. She redefined it. If the story touched something deep in you, don't keep it to yourself. So share, comment, and subscribe, because voices like hers deserve to be heard. And subscribe so you never miss the truth we're bringing next.